We've all heard about the extremes people will go to escape across the Mexican border into the U.S. But most Canadians probably aren't aware it's happening on our border, too. Refugees jumping trains, crossing rivers, and trekking through the woods. As Leslie Roberts reports, it's all because going home is not an option.
An almost 9,000-kilometer line that separates Canada from the U.S. Cut in the tree line, it looks insignificant from the air, but it is all too real on the ground.
We got Canada to the right, and we got the States to the left.
RCMP Staff Sergeant Brian Byrne has spent much of his career catching drug, alcohol, and tobacco smugglers along the Quebec-U.S. border.
This is the largest just port of entry, eastern Canada.
These days, he's picking up another type of lawbreaker.
I mean, immigration wasn't a problem at all. Very seldom we would have a case.
That port used to be a first stop for refugees to safely make a claim to come to Canada. But ever since the laws tightened up, more of them are sneaking across. One night in the middle of winter, Brian's unit got a call from the U.S. Border Patrol, who spotted tracks in thick woods going to Canada.
And when they got there, they found a gentleman in the snow that was suffering from hypothermia. He was in very bad shape. We rushed him to the hospital, and the doctor had to amputate him. He lost one foot and one hand.
The railroad bridge is a very dangerous way of coming into Canada.
Almost 700 kilometers southwest of Brian's patrol, Sister Judy Carroll has seen people taking unbelievable risks to cross this rail bridge from the U.S. into Canada.
They walk on the side, and then if a train starts to come, sometimes they jump and have their body on the outside of the track because obviously the train is coming through. Aquí le café? ¿Hay café?
For 50 years, Sister Judy helped rescue people in the world's most dangerous hotspots, including Rwanda.
I went into Rwanda because we had several sisters who were held up during the genocide. We were helped by the UN forces. Finally, we were helicoptered out.
She fought to save people's lives in Africa. Now she finds herself doing the same thing in Canada. One night, she got a call from the police about a man they picked up.
He was sopping wet, full of mud, could hardly talk, could hardly get his breath. He had swam across the river. A friend of his has said, the river isn't that wide, we'll try it. And his friend, he doesn't know what happened to his friend. The current could have swept them down. And he said it was the most horrifying experience you can ever imagine. He's lucky to be alive.
It can be just as dangerous for someone trying to cross into Canada over the water.
There's one person that was caught by the train, and he was walking across. The train came, and he wasn't prepared. He didn't know what to do. Because of the injuries from the train, he had both his legs amputated. When people are desperate, they will find a way. They will do everything to be able to come into the country any way possible.
I was scared. I was desperate.
Rebecca was one of those people willing to do almost anything when she made her escape from El Salvador. Rebecca is gay, and in El Salvador, that meant she was in danger.
I got phone calls, threatened, saying that I was a pervert. I got my car destroyed. 2 guys beat me really bad, tried to rape me. That's the sense that they have. I'm going to show you to be a woman, so you definitely don't come out.
Rebecca and her girlfriend moved in together. But when her girlfriend's estranged husband, a military man, found out, Rebecca says he sent 2 men who attacked her on the street. Rebecca fled the country, even leaving her daughter behind.
I just took a couple of books My daughter gave me 3 stuffed animals, and she put that in my luggage, and she says that I had to promise to. So. Yes, she says that that was my mission to bring them back, right?
She never did get to return those toys. Rebecca hasn't seen her daughter since she had to escape.
My daughter is studying in Honduras, as far as I know. I'm not allowed to communicate with her.
Rebecca made it to the U.S., but she'd heard that the States has a track record of deporting people like her. So she decided it was too risky to stay.
This girl from El Salvador, she was a lesbian, and she came out and she asked for refugee status in States, and she got denied. She was sent back, she got killed. I will definitely not take the risk.
Rebecca had to get out to the only safe place she knew, Canada. But the doors to this country weren't as open as they once were.
A new law coming into effect in 2 weeks will change how people can apply for refugee status in our 2 countries.
That law, passed after 9/11, was supposed to tighten the border and cut down on the number of refugee claims.
You were supposed to have family who can prove that it's your family, like blood related.
Without family here, Rebecca, who would have been able to legally claim refugee status at the border before, now had to break the law to get in. But, in a strange twist, she didn't need a relative if she could get to a refugee claim center in a city. So Rebecca took a taxi to the Vermont-Quebec line, planning to slip over the border.
It's a lot of adrenaline. You feel nervous. You don't think.
At midnight, Rebecca found a small, isolated border post, mostly empty, and just kept going, walking dozens of kilometers along the road to Montreal.
I just didn't stop. I was bleeding pretty bad. I could see the blood on top of my running shoes, but I didn't realize that until I came to a full stop 7 hours later. And I was scared, right? I'm in the middle of nowhere. I don't know anybody. What else am I gonna do?
All these roads lead to the border, so at this point here, at the end, we got a port of entry.
If Staff Sergeant Brian Byrne had driven past her on his section of the road, it would have been his job to return her to the border, and that could have meant a big risk of being sent back to El Salvador. But even the man charged with keeping our borders secure is sympathetic.
They're not criminals of any kinds, but you know, they just try to get a better life, and they know what Canada has to offer.
In the 10 years since Canada tightened the refugee laws, a steadily increasing number of people are taking chances, like Rebecca, crossing illegally to get to cities to avoid being turned back at the border. And like Rebecca, for many, it's meant putting their lives at risk.
To hear that somebody's tried swimming across and drowned, of course, that's not something that I want to hear.
Inspector Ivan Verdeman is Brian's boss. He says the tougher rules have made it harder for his officers, who patrol a massive 800-kilometer section of border, to do their work.
So the inland routes, people coming through, yes, it does make our job more difficult.
In 2007, and again in 2010, law enforcement officials blamed the new law, called the Safe Third Country Agreement, for more migrants sneaking into Canada. 2 years later, in 2012, it had gotten so bad that even Canada's immigration minister, Jason Kenney, admitted that the law was not working.
So the agreement's become a bit of a paper tiger, unfortunately, and that's why we have to find other ways to deter people who are not bona fide refugees but are trying to abuse our generosity from doing so.
Hi, how are you? Shelley Carroll, nice to see you.
Shelley Carroll is a city councillor running for re-election in Toronto, Canada's biggest city. She says it's not people abusing our generosity, but bad federal immigration policies to blame for the rapidly growing number of undocumented people who are living illegally in her city.
The change in the immigration laws and the change in the way those are processed means that we could easily be at 100,000 in a very short number of years. Until the federal government realizes that we want them to be full citizens, we've got to take another look at our policy. We're going to do our best to make them great citizens of Toronto, They're not undocumented citizens to us. They're undocumented Torontonians.
She says those federal rules have pushed this massive underclass so far to the margins that she backed a policy called Sanctuary City.
We don't want to grow a criminal immigration underground in our city, so we're going to create a sanctuary. They're going to have access to our city's parks, our recreation centers, our health services.
But Sanctuary City is offering more than parks and recreation centers. The big promise is no snitching to the feds. Desirable future citizens or not, anybody will be able to get city services, no questions asked.
I'm not going to suddenly turn myself into the border police, rat them out, and destroy a neighborhood.
Toronto won't even take down names.
As soon as we create that database, really you've created the potential to rat them out. Why are we calling it Sanctuary City if we're not creating sanctuary? I'm not going to rat them out. I'm not the border police. This is not New Mexico.
Whatever the person's background, the point, Shelley says, is to keep people from going deeper underground.
You don't need to go to a criminal authority at the back of a bar to get yourself taken care of in this community. The community wants you to be as legitimate as possible.
The government may once have admitted the Safe Third Country Agreement is a failure, but today the official line is the law is enhancing the orderly handling of refugee claims, reducing abuse, and providing protection to those in need. The federal government has no plans to change things. While the government might call it enhancing the orderly handling of refugee claims, for Rebecca, it was hell. She eventually found her way to a refugee shelter in Toronto. She now works as an administrator at a college and has become a Canadian citizen.
If you're opening your doors to refugees, what's the difference to do that at the border or inside the country? I wasn't trying to do something illegal. I was trying to save my life. And if I have to cross the border and that's gonna put my life at risk, I will.
Next, gone isn't forever any longer.
The goal is to take this bird, turn it into this extinct bird.
RCMP Staff Sergeant Brian Byrne has spent much of his career catching drug, alcohol, and tobacco smugglers along the Quebec-U.S. border.
This is the largest just port of entry, eastern Canada.
These days, he's picking up another type of lawbreaker.
I mean, immigration wasn't a problem at all. Very seldom we would have a case.
That port used to be a first stop for refugees to safely make a claim to come. An almost 9,000-kilometer line that separates Canada from the U.S. Cut in the tree line, it looks insignificant from the air, but it is all too real on the ground.
We got Canada to the right, and we got the States to the left.
And the doctor had to amputate him. He lost one foot and one hand.
The railroad bridge is a very dangerous way of coming into Canada.
Almost 700 kilometers southwest of Brian's patrol, Sister Judy Carroll has seen people taking unbelievable to Canada. But ever since the laws tightened up, more of them are sneaking across. One night in the middle of winter, Brian's unit got a call from the U.S. Border Patrol, who spotted tracks in thick woods going to Canada.
And when they got there, they found a gentleman in the snow that was suffering from hypothermia. He was in very bad shape. We rushed him to the hospital.
We've all heard about the extremes people will go to escape across the Mexican border into the U.S. But most Canadians probably aren't aware it's happening on our border, too. Refugees jumping trains, crossing rivers, and trekking through the woods. As Leslie Roberts reports, it's all because going home is not an option.